Hello and welcome everyone in another episode of Researcher Celebrity. Today we have Dr. Dheeraj Hans with us as our researcher celebrity and a brief introduction of Dr. Dheeraj. He has done his bachelor's in pharmacy from Rajiv Gandhi College in Bangalore University, and then for master's and PhD, Dr. Dheeraj moved to University of Queensland where he did his master's in biotechnology and specialization for PhD he pursued molecular biosciences. Then he came back to India and did his uh, MBA from MIT University. And currently, now he is a senior business development manager at University of Melbourne with a lot of positions where he worked with. He has worked in commercial and scientific positions to support product development and translational research. With this brief introduction, I would like to welcome Dr. Dheeraj at the platform, say acknowledging our gratitude for taking time out of your busy schedule so that we can have the motivation and the passion going for the next generation of researchers.
Thank you, Dr. Raya. Thanks for the opportunity.
So we always start our this conversation with our researcher celebrities that how and when you decided that you want to become a researcher.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question, because I was not looking for the researcher as a career. I decided to become a researcher after my master's because it was during my master's, which was only by coursework. I did not have a research component. And I felt that, when I moved to Australia, that if I need to really learn and do something, I need to get into the research career and be exposed to research and see how it feels to be a researcher. So it was during, so I started with some small research projects, part-time, and then moved into a full-time research.
So in India, you have never experienced research of any kind.
No, I just did my bachelor's in pharmacy, and I straight away moved within 6 months to Australia.
Okay. So the first thing that when you started in the research in Australia, and then you might have had plenty of friends, family, relatives in India who were doing something similar. So what made you think that you want to pursue a PhD?
No, I actually did not have anyone, even in sciences.
Mm-hmm.
So I come from a business family background. We did not have anyone who was doing science, so I was the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And my other friends who took science with me during my school days actually moved on to do other things in their life.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually didn't know anyone in the research field, and that's why I didn't know that if I can do masters in biotech, I can be a researcher. I thought I'll do maybe a biotech masters, come back and maybe start my own company or something on those lines.
So
Being a researcher was never on the agenda.
absolutely. And we had so many researcher celebrities who never thought in the first place that they want to become a researcher. And that's why we keep this question. So, being said, you are first generation of researchers in your family. And
Yeah.
all, as you mentioned, that you come from a family background where everyone wants to do their business, being entrepreneurs or family businesses there where you're supposed to join. So, in the first place, what made you think that to start with PhD and then pursue career in research?
Um, when I was so it was like after my masters, I went back to India, and then I got a job as a research assistant at International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology in Delhi. That's where, if you need to say, started my own research journey after the studies. Um, but after, a little bit of spending some time and, when you get exposed to a lot of other researchers, because in that same environment, you feel like, if you need to grow in the field, uh, you should be thinking of PhD. Having said that, it's not that, PhD is the only option.
Mhm.
There are a lot of other options that, people can pursue. And I've met so many people like that. But, you know, in India, generally, it's a uh, perception that you have to have a PhD if you want to grow. So that's where I started. Started to write my exams and apply for scholarships. And once I had the scholarship done, I moved back to Australia again to do my PhD.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit about the scholarships, the opportunities, and the process, because we have seen now Indian students want to pursue PhD, or research, even master's fund, but only if it is funded. Like most of the researchers, or at least the young enthusiastic students who want to become researcher, they want to move out of India, but they want a funded support programs,
Yeah.
because there are very less number of students, if we go by percentage, who go by their own pockets and then fund it. So how you can guide our these young brains that how they should approach this?
Yeah, all the countries have their own system, so I can talk for Australia and what happens here. I think in Australia, what especially the top end researchers they value most is if they don't know you, as you said, if they're coming from India and they have no idea about you, it is important that when you're looking for their profiles, when you're looking for what sort of research they do, before talking to them, do your own research work. You should know what sort of grants they are getting. You should know what sort of projects they have, their publication. So when you're writing an email to them, it should not look like a job email that this is what I am and try to sell yourself, but rather than you need to make a connection there that this is what I have done and this is what I want to achieve in my life. And I feel that I looked at your research portfolio, these are the type of research projects you have, and I would like to make contribution there. And if you have a position, I want to apply for a PhD. So coming from outside, you need to do a bit of groundwork
Mhm.
and make a personal connection with the researchers. um, when a researcher accepts and says, okay, they have a position and they can offer you, it is when you start to fill out the forms in Australia. There are different scholarships programs. One is called as the International Postgraduate Research Scholarship, or IPRS in generally, that international students go for, which basically covers all your tuition fees, your living expenses, your medicals. Not for you, just also. It used to cover family as well. I'm not sure if it still does, but it gives you basically a family health insurance program, which is pretty good. But sometimes universities have their own scholarship programs, and even departments have their own. So there is no, you can say, Australia-wide test that you need to give to get a scholarship in Australia. It's more of a researcher level commitments, discussions, funding availability with them, and then you apply for institutional or university-wide scholarship programs.
Absolutely. And funding availability is one of the most important one happen to be, because we have heard stories where students moved from India to different countries, and they were either very less funded, or in some cases it was not even able to support themselves, families next level. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
let's
IPRS does good coverage there.
yeah, yeah. So this is very important to. So if I have to say that, I'll say that even to become a researcher, you have to do your research, as you mentioned. That you have to
Yes.
start by doing with your background work, all the homework, wherever you are applying the person, the kind of grants they have got. Because now you can see that if somebody got received a grant just in the year, so at least for a couple of years, they are going to do all the work in that field. And if you can think of something like that, or at least show the interest that you want to do something in there, and which aligns with the lab goals, which is very important. Okay, so we have heard a lot of stories how PhD goes in India, but happening said, like, we had one researcher celebrity only who did their PhD in Australia. How was your journey?
I think it was good because I went back to the same lab where I did my master's project, and just to make a connection there. And one more important point is just getting scholarship or just being in the lab and doing a good work is not important. Um, your commitment to research, that you really want to be there, and most importantly, I believe why I got the scholarship because I knew the researcher and I had worked with him. It was because uh, in my early days during my master's project, my postdoc told me to have a discipline, and which is something that I've kept even till date. Is like, it doesn't matter if you have a work or not. If you're doing a full-time research, you should be in the lab from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the evening minimum. If it is a requirement that for some experiments, you need to be there after that, so be it. Uh, but it's important that during those work hours, you are here full time.
Yes, absolutely.
And that, shows your commitment indirectly to the research group leader. I think it's important you keep that in mind. Now, coming to my PhD experience, um, I think it's important to mention that not all PhDs are Nobel Prizes or Nature papers. So don't worry about that part. Um, I literally had like two publications and not in a very high impact journals. It does not matter because towards the end, what mattered was the skills that you gain,
Yes.
which are transferable, the knowledge that you gain, which is transferable. Um, Even a failed experiments or a research project is also a research project.
Yes.
So don't be disheartened by that. And that's what, my research journey taught me, because I knew from the beginning that my project is a high risk project. It may or may not work. It worked partially. So thankfully, I had a couple of publications, but generally in Australia, what happens is it's a time bound research journey, especially for international students. You have to complete your PhD in 3 years and you get maximum 6 months extension. So within 3.5 years, you're out. So every 6 months, there's a committee that sits, that reviews your project, makes sure that, you have the support, make sure that, you get what you need, be it access to materials or be it access to equipment or, whatever is required. They make sure that, based on the discussions and how the project was designed, those things are available for you.
Absolutely. This is very
Or,
important.
or
And in fact, being time bound is the best part, if we can say, but it brings a lot of pressure also on the student. So, how did you cope up with that?
um, as I said, so I think we, like in the very first 3 months, we knew we had like completely planned out what I'm going to do in my 3 years.
Mhm.
So, like, because as I said, it was an early research project, and I did my research project in a chemistry lab on a vaccine. So you
Mhm.
can imagine the difficulties I will have. Uh, so my group leader told me that let's start with the review.
Mhm.
Why don't you go back and do a complete review of the literature, when possibly over 200 articles or something in the field, uh, and write your own review.
Mhm.
Because then what happens is once you have done that, not only you're on top of the field, you can also be publishing that review,
Mhm.
one, and second, that can be your first chapter of thesis.
Yes.
So within the first 1 year, uh, we had completed that part.
Mhm.
And after then, as I said, there's a periodic review with the committee. And that's when, after the first 6 months, we had decided, okay, now that, the review is there, let me start getting used to the lab, do some, skills and techniques that I need during my PhD. So we discussed those techniques that I need to be on top of. The first 6 months, again, were mostly refining those techniques, making sure I'm top of that. And then it's the next 2 years when I was full on doing my research progress, that I needed to do and all the experiments, and
Mhm.
completely focused with every 6 months, 3 months review with my supervisor, co-supervisor, where we needed to make changes. So it was not that we were doing something and then waiting for 6 months. Uh, it was a continuous review process for those two, the second and the third year.
Mhm. So now we have seen a very sudden and high increase in researchers after PhD performing or joining MBA programs. For you, how was that, and what made you think that you want to do, like you started an MBA?
Okay, okay. There's a bit of PhD context to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So during my PhD at the University of Queensland, during the days, what they had was a compulsory program that all PhD students need to attend regarding research commercialization because they wanted those PhD students that come out of the university to be exposed to the different environments, different options, um, and more importantly, you may not pursue, but for your visibility and your understanding that beyond research, once you have got a technology and you want to take it to the world, um, what are the steps that people on the other end, on the business sides, need to think about, and how do you craft those steps so that your research makes some sense. So it was I believe 3 or 4 months training, if I need to say, that all PhD students need to go through. So it was during that process, and again, coming from business background family, I again got interested in the, let's say, the business of research.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
uh,
Absolutely.
so when I finished my PhD, and because I was an international student, I came back to India again. Went to ICGB, and we had a discussion, what I wanted to do for my future.
Mm-hmm.
And it was clear that I wanted to be connected with the research,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted to do some other things,
Yes, absolutely.
which is supporting research, translation of research to the next stage, and be part of that journey rather than, standing in the lab for 10 hours and doing pipetting.
Absolutely.
And, the interest changes, as you evolve in your life.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's when, I started my discussions with the supervisor
Mhm.
again in ICGB, and I joined there as a part-time postdoc and a part-time project manager.
Okay.
Uh, and then, after like first, so that was 2010, roughly 2009, October.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and after 3, 4 years, I decided that, if I need to be seriously into this business sides, then I need to start thinking about the, getting some formal education and understanding of managerial concepts and those things. So in 2011, I started my MBA.
Nice. Research management is a real thing these days, and in most of the elite institutes or the pioneers, they have established a new department called as Department of, like, where they are going to do this translational research, technology transfers, or research commercialization, as you said. So you have tasted the research from very basic ground where you performed all of those experiments. Now you are instrumental for a couple of years where you have taken the research, as they say, from bench to the shelf. What is the most important part where you felt that being done a PhD has given you that power to understand, or if a person who has not been done their PhD but are in the field, how do you suggest that?
Um, as a PhD, as I said, you, let's say, might be doing PhD in malaria, cancer, or whichever field, it does not matter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, End of the day, what matters is your transferable skills.
Yeah.
Uh, because what it teaches you is kind of different skills to understand the
Mm-hmm.
science, um, going back to the, identification of the problem,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then looking at the, analysis part,
Mm-hmm.
you know, conceptualization of what could be the possible solutions of a problem and executing on those. Right, that's what a PhD will teach you, which sometimes you kind of, because you're working under strict instructions during your after your masters as an RA, sometimes those do not naturally occur.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's those transferable skill sets that even if you switch between fields,
Yeah.
they are important because they will stay the same.
Absolutely. And this is like Dr. Tia, my PhD supervisor, he always used to say that PhD trains you for the life. And as
Yeah.
you mentioned about having gaining these skill sets, so you can change different fields just because you have those skill set. And you mentioned about the knowledge gained is a part of it, but the most important part of every single person who has done their PhD is giving the solutions. There are problems which are there, which you make your research questions and then provide solutions to the world so that we can make the world as a better place to be.
Yeah, that's correct.
So let's talk about now when you are in research, commercialization part. And if people are, some of your researchers, and because you are already also advising the Melbourne Medical School and School of Biomedical Sciences for translational and commercialization of research. When the PhD student or the researchers who are doing all this wet lab work are facing some challenges or issues, do you converse with them and try to, make this path smooth?
Um, in my day-to-day life, I do work with many researchers,
Mhm,
um, come from, all type of fields, they could be clinicians, they could be basic science researchers, or they could be, doing this synthesis of new molecules and doing chemistry and those things. And, because of the wide variety of the background I have, where I come from, chemistry to uh, molecular biology techniques and proteins and PC. Back in the days, when we used to run around for PCRs, getting them outside. So, because I've got that understanding, so, it gives me that confidence that I can sit down with those researchers and discuss, um, especially if there are some challenges they are facing, or, look for alternative solutions. But, in my role, what I also do is when there are particular problems with, let's say, particular experiments or question that we are trying to answer. I also, go back and see, if there are companies outside who are doing and how they have done it.
mhm,
And more importantly, when it comes to doing those experiments, the first question generally we ask them is, do you have money?
mhm,
Because in my role, I also, not just find those solutions, I
mhm.
also need to find them some funding
Yes.
so we can do that. So my role is both sides, not only, working with the researchers to um, first identify those questions that, if we were to partner with pharma, they'll
Mhm,
be asking, or a VC, if you are looking to spin out a company
mhm,
from scientific point of view. So not only I need to ask those relevant questions that are relevant to industry,
mhm,
um, but also find solutions and maybe also many times, which is pretty common, find funding.
mhm. So now you talked about the funding part, startups and entrepreneurs. I would like to ask you that if you have to guide a researcher from India, if they ask that, okay, we have an idea, if there is a potential, how to bridge that gap that a PhD student who knows the science but don't know anything about this commercialization part, how they should train themselves.
I think the first step um, for anyone to think about those things is do not think about what you can do.
Mhm,
You could be brilliant at, let's say, developing a particular AI model to predict something, or you could be doing designing new molecules. Um, the first point is, you know, who will use it?
mhm.
Think about it from their point of view rather than your point of view.
Nice.
And, work backwards from there.
Mhm,
So if you're training an AI model, which can be, let's say, used in an hospital environment to help a patient journey,
mhm,
right? So think about it, how is it going to benefit patients and how is it going to benefit hospital?
mhm.
So always, if once you start thinking from the end point
Mhm.
and work backwards, that
Mhm.
will tell you, if you need to get to that next step, what will you need,
Yeah.
right? Uh, because for many times, we have seen that it's very common, both in India, Australia, researchers are not different anyway,
Mhm,
especially when it comes to basic science, you can be tied up in your own little world
mhm.
of pathways, targets, and those things, and not think, and, in your back of your mind, you think that you're working on a particular pathway that has impact in cancer,
Mhm.
right? But what you don't know is in which particular cancer population are we talking about?
Mhm.
What is the unmet need for that particular cancer population? How are they getting treated today?
Mhm.
You know, because once you start to work backwards, then you realize that there are currently two therapeutics. So when you are looking at your pathway, what is it that other treatments are not doing? So
Mhm.
working backwards tells you what experiments you need to design or as controls you need to design.
Absolutely. Now, this is very important, as you mentioned about starting with thinking not what you have, who is going to use it. End user point of view is very important to prepare yourself better for the market. Yes. So now we'll discuss something about when you are when a product is ready, starting different phases for the patents and everything which you have to go through before. Now, a researcher, if they want to start up something on their own, because PhD trains you for all the research, as you mentioned, you can design your experiments, but
Mhm.
where they can learn more about how to do, like as basic as the registration of a company, or for the potential collaboration, or if they are going to outsource is, uh, like the commercialization of the patent also.
Yeah, I think there are two things there. The first one is I think the startup journey in India could be very different.
Mhm.
For registration of companies, the laws are different to Australia, so it will be a very different one. Um, at least within Australia, we know that we need to all we need to do is register an ABN,
Mhm.
right? Which is Australian business number.
Mhm.
Anyone, even anyone can do that. Who's living in Australia, you can register a company.
Mhm.
It's a simple 10 minutes exercise online that you can complete, and you basically have an ABN, which is you are a registered company.
Mhm.
So that's a very straightforward process here. Um, but more importantly, I'll say that patents are not the only thing.
Mhm.
Um, and we discuss all these things, all the time with researchers. It's looking at your intellectual property,
Mhm.
which could be your know-how, which could be your expertise in something, which could be anything that you are doing uh, with respect to the product development.
Mhm.
Could be a software code which cannot be filed for a patent.
Mhm.
So don't think of research commercialization of patent as the only option.
Mhm.
Uh, Always look at patent. Once you have filed a patent, it starts the clock.
Mhm.
So if you file your patent too early, it
Mhm.
limits your commercialization. So patents are always filed at an appropriate stage where you can, protect, but
Mhm.
also maximize your commercialization opportunity. Otherwise, it will be difficult for you to find the venture capital investments.
True. And you also mentioned about the intellectual property rights, what they call IPR, is very much, in action in India these days.
Yeah,
So now we'll talk about the challenges of getting into the field, because when a new PhD student comes up with an idea and when everything is working in the lab, but there are these market sharks which are already working in there, and now you are going to pitch your product to them.
yeah,
There are incidences which have been seen that sometimes, as you mentioned, they start as a startup, sell it off, and then make their money go out. But
yeah,
sometimes in the, like, very rare cases, but there are the cases about this also, like where a researcher had to lose all the research which they have done, or sometimes in very very rarest of the rare cases where they were get killed by the so-called, our, what we call that as the all sharks, like the big market player who are in there and who don't want you to enter into that the zone or the niche of that.
mhm. Um, Look, it's a difficult one. And the reason is always remember that, let's say once you are a startup,
Mm-hmm.
right? Always your next journey is to, and once you are in a startup world, remember that, um, not everyone is a CEO and not everyone is a CSO.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
once you start a company based on your research, for which let's say you may own 100% of it, or
Mm-hmm.
you may own 50% or whatever the percentage is, depending on who is working with you in that startup.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Always go in the mind, and you need to have that mindset that once you raise the next round of money,
Mm-hmm.
whatever is required, you will be diluted.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on the money that you raise, you could be diluting yourself significantly. But always think of it from the point that, today it's 1 rupee of 100% that you have, so you have one. But tomorrow it may be 1,000 rupee and you may own 50% of that, so you will have 500 rupees.
Mm-hmm.
So do not think of it, giving up on your research. Think of it as, you know, you are gaining.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it from that point of view. And always, you need money to, progress your research. Um, yes, within India, there may be cases, where they do that. But looking outside, there are many, many options available, and they're happy to invest, in other countries. There are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of VCs. So it is about exposing yourself, attending those relevant conferences, exposing yourself to, that world. Uh, but more importantly, before you expose yourself, it is again, understanding what is it that they would like.
Mm-hmm.
From VC's point of view, then you need to know who are the people in the room, what is their expertise, and what are their interests. If you have VCs in the room who are looking at investing just for a position in the company and they are not science trained, and if that is a requirement of your capital raise, then that's it. But if your capital raise requirements also need that you are exposed to, let's say, people higher ups in the pharma industry, in addition to getting the money, then you need to choose your VC.
Mm-hmm.
So it is about, identifying what is it that you need for the next step,
Very true.
and which are those people who can bring in those additional expertise apart from cash.
Absolutely. And if you can also a little bit guide about the what we have seen in India, and I believe that is true probably for most of the world all around, that the number of startups are increasing everywhere
Yeah,
significantly, but the closing, the shutdowns are also very a significant amount of that goes to the shutdown. So if one have to avoid that, how they can, get some guidance from you on this, because you already have played instrumental role in company playoffs also.
yeah. I think it's important, from the startup side. Um, Before, I know it's a very exciting field and everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, but it is important for everyone to understand that not everything is a startup.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I'll say, talk to the people and get commercial advice before you jump on a startup journey. Um, there could be a lot of technologies that are suitable for licensing than a startup, and if that's the case, it is likely that you may not go too far. So there are differences between translation of a particular technology, whether that happens through sometimes research collaborations with the company, sometimes licenses,
Mm-hmm.
um, and in some instances, startup may be the option.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say if startup is the option, if you look at the publications, the
Mm-hmm.
main reason why startups fail actually is not because of cash.
Mm-hmm.
It is because of the team.
Okay.
Because once you had started, let's say, in early development of your AI model for something, is because you had the expertise to develop that AI model.
Mm-hmm.
But then you realize that if you need to take it to market, you need to put it on a cloud platform, or you need to connect with hospitals, so you need kind of maybe someone who has understanding of that clinical end or technical end,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then they might come in as, let's say, they take some equity in the company
Mm-hmm.
because you may or may not have money to pay them.
Yes.
And if you have not chosen those right people to
Mm-hmm.
be in the team, um, very soon you will realize that your ideas for translation and the vision that you had for the company
Mm-hmm.
um, is not going anywhere.
Yes.
So the very first reason why things fail is because of the team.
Okay.
Uh, it's the people. Why, and more importantly, I think if you talk to VCs
Mm-hmm.
generally, everyone has ideas, and all research is good research. There's nothing that your research is not good, but generally VCs in or sometimes even pharma, depending on their internal due diligence, they invest in people.
Mm-hmm.
You can see, people who had the track record of delivering something, they get reinvestments
Yes.
once they move to other companies. That's because they have a track record. They know how to make things work and they know how to deliver them.
Absolutely. And as you
So
mentioned,
VCs
the
put a trust
teamwork.
on that.
Yeah, very, very important part. So now we'll say that now you are more on the commercialization part.
Yeah.
Do you miss research?
Not exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I still, sometimes, you know, I'm not holding pipette in my hand, but as I said, I am discussing research in detail
Mm-hmm.
with my researchers. There sometimes, depending on the researchers,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we also go down to discussing, okay, what sort of control you're having, and show me, how you're doing. So we go down to those level of details.
So
So I don't
yes,
exactly miss
this is something like we always say that once a researcher, always a researcher. So
always.
now, so the next one will be which is more challenging, this administration part, or making money out of your research, or just doing the research?
uh, I don't know if there's any challenges if you enjoy,
Okay,
because where I come, if at any point I do not enjoy a particular role, I just change.
absolutely.
So even when I was doing my research, as I said, I was committed, and
Mhm.
that's what I wanted to do. So I did my PhD and the research after that. And today, when I'm doing this role, I enjoy this. Get to talk to so many different type of clinicians, so many different type of researchers who are developing technologies, products, molecules, therapeutics, and all of those things
Mhm.
in so many different diseases. Sometimes I feel privileged that I know so much.
Mhm.
So I kind of enjoy my role. So I don't take it as a challenge. I just kind of have fun.
No, this is something which actually I learn so much from having these conversations. And it comes every now and then that do whatever makes you happy. And this is one thing which I try to say to all the researchers that if it gives you stress, it is normal,
Yeah.
but it should not be chronic. It should
Yeah.
not be prolonging. If you are, doing the revisions, then yes, it is a stressful time if the comments are very harsh.
Yeah. I mean, if there is no stress, something is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. But the point here is like do whatever makes you happy, and that is the
Yeah.
important part. Why we should, as you said, enjoy what we are doing. If we are not
Yeah.
enjoying it, probably it will, if in any time, it will bring the stress, and it is not good for that. So with this, we'll say to all the audience that if you want further, details or mentoring from Dr. Dheeraj, you can write it to him. If you want Empowering Sense Foundation, you can write to us, and then we can put you in touch with our researcher celebrities. The only thing which we say that enjoy your passion, enjoy your research. You are going to make it wherever you want at some point of time. With a little bit of guidance and networking, we are here for that. And at the end, we will say thank you very much, Dr. Dheeraj, for this enlightening conversation and easing out the roadmap for our researchers who want to become entrepreneurs also.
No problem. I hope, we have some good entrepreneurs coming after this talk.
Absolutely. That is the idea. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.